Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the 5 greatest Gershwin conductors. I mean, I'll bet you never thought there were Gershwin conductors, but there are. You know, Gershwin, he's a fascinating character, let's put it that way. He exists on the cusp between classical and popular music. He still really deserves credit for writing the great American opera, Porgy and Bess, which is a stunner that still doesn't really get the attention and the credit that it deserves for being a shrieking, screaming masterpiece. But beyond that, he wrote very little orchestral music. There's the Rhapsody in Blue, the Second Rhapsody, the Piano Concerto, An American in Paris. There are, if you add like the Broadway overtures, there's a bunch of those, and then some, little short sniglet things. The I Got Rhythm variations. I mean, that's about it. Catfish Row, the suite from Porgy and Bess. He was a music theater guy for most of his career and a songwriter, but he was one who had so much charisma and personality that you can have specialist artists, who work in with his output, particularly, and it's especially true in that rarefied realm, the classical music world, of the pops concert, music that takes from popular music and arrangements and things and light music and all that stuff. All of those things matter. There's great music there. Really, really great music there. Gershwin's music is extraordinarily great music, for all that there's very little of it in the classical realm. And the truth of the matter is that it requires a certain sense of style, a feeling for jazz and popular music idioms, and also a sense of classical form. And the best Gershwin conductors live in both worlds. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they do. There are people who do, and it's marvelous that they do. It's just great. There are some who don't. I can't imagine Karl Böhm being a great Gershwin conductor. I just can't. But there are others who are comfortable with the idiom and who conduct it splendidly. And here they are. Number 1, Leonard Bernstein, of course. He is famous as a soloist in Rhapsody in Blue, which he played with huge cuts, and I think his interpretation of it was just atrocious. I really do. But he was still an amazing conductor of An American in Paris, and he played the Rhapsody as though he was the guy who composed it. He made it his own, and you either have to succumb or just, walk away in a snit. I've done both. I've succumbed to a snit, you want to put it that way. But, he was a genius conductor, and his playing of Gershwin, it was incredibly stylish and exciting. So, what can I say? Next, Felix Slatkin, the dad of Leonard, who conducted the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra and spent most of his career with his wife, the cellist Eleanor Aller, playing in Hollywood film orchestras. And he was just a marvelous violinist and a wonderfully stylish conductor. And his Gershwin recordings on RCA or Capitol or whatever was making them in those days have been released. They're in a scribendum box of Felix Slatkin's Hollywood Bowl concerts. And they were also released by EMI at one point or another. And they're just wonderful. They are so idiomatically right and comfortable and just terrific sounding. They're just fabulous. So he was a guy, he was absolutely comfortable in the more popular side of things, but as the Hollywood String Quartet recordings of things like the late Beethoven Quartet show, they Slatkin could effortlessly live in both worlds. And I just so admire people who could do that. I really do. It's such a gift. And we, the classical people like to sniff and say, well, they're slumming, they're dumbing it down. No, it's called talent. There's just gobs of talent that these people have. And it's a marvelous thing, as it was with Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops. Wow, his Gershwin record with Earl Wild, it's got the greatest ever piano concerto. You know, there's a tendency, especially when classical people get hold of this music, to try and make it bigger and more grandiose than it is. And it's unfortunate, really, because the music should have a certain lightness, a spring in its step, a freshness. And Fiedler could have been 175, and he never forgot that. His American in Paris is like a couple minutes faster than just about everybody else's, but it's just phenomenal. The Cuban Overture, you know, all of these things are just I don't even know if he did the Cuban Overture at one point, but you know, just amazing. Amazing stuff. Absolutely amazing stuff. Then there is Slatkin the son, Leonard Slatkin, who did a wonderful, wonderful Gershwin set for Vox early on in his career with the St. Louis Symphony. He has all of his dad's talent and ability to live in worlds other than the strictly heavy-duty classical. And oh gosh, it just makes people so much more interesting when they can do that. It really does. I just love this stuff. And his Gershwin is effortlessly musical and stylish and just full of good things. It's absolutely wonderful. And last but not least, Michael Tilson Thomas, who really made a career, his early career, especially when he was in Buffalo, out of doing Gershwin. Wonderful performances of Gershwin's Broadway overtures. I mean, he unearthed all kinds of things that weren't getting played, and did them with extraordinary sensitivity. He was famous for reconstituting the original jazz band version of the Rhapsody in Blue with Gershwin's own piano roll of the piano part added. I mean, he did some really wonderful things to bring Gershwin, I think, into the modern age, with performances of just immaculate style and idiomatic flair. Really one of his great contributions, which will never be recognized as such, of course, because, well, it's Gershwin, and you know, it's not Mahler. And I think that's just such a shame, because boy, is this great music. And Tilson Thomas did remarkable work, and we have to just acknowledge greatness wherever we find it. That's the trick, that we're the journey we're all embarking on, to find the best and praise it accordingly, and of course excoriate the worst, which is just endless fun. So there you have it, the 5 greatest Gershwin conductors. And if you have a few that you want to add to your own list, I stress here, make a list and tell us a little bit about why you've made the choices you have. So thanks so much for joining me, friends. Keep on listening and take care.